An Empire of Ice and Fire by Longclaw 1-6. Chapter 33. Arya. Semi-awake, Daenerys Targaryen flipped from her left to her right, arm plopping onto her bedmate. Or at least where her bedmate was supposed to be. Though his masculine, smoky scent still wafted into her nostrils, Dany's touch was instead greeted by a pillow tugged against her. Well, shit. Groaning quietly, Dany rolled onto her back and stretched, fingers brushing the headboard. If it had been the morning, it wouldn't have surprised her much. Neither snow nor sleet could keep Jon from his essentially kingly duties around Winterfell. His sense of duty was one of the things she loved most about him, though them always waking up together had become such a pleasant new tradition. Faculties slowly returning, Dany's ears perked up at the crackling of the fireplace. The fire always burns out by morning. Scooting till she was sitting up, there was Jon. He sat silently in front of the flames, shaggy black curls visible atop the back of the plush chair. Daenerys could tell he was brooding, darkly, without even seeing his face. Quietly she slipped out of the bed and draped a thick woolen robe over her nude form. Jon didn't notice her, at least she figured he didn't. Behind him, Dany wrapped her arms around his neck. He tensed. "Can't sleep?" she asked, kissing the crown of his head. "Aye." Thoughts dark, a sense of relief spread through Jon's body at her touch. "Go back to bed, Dany. No need to get up on my account." He didn't want to worry her. He had kept his fears and worries to himself long enough to be used to it. What Jon didn't count on was the stubbornness of a dragon. Sighing, Daenerys disentangled her arms from his neck and grabbed a second chair. It was lighter but still cushioned, making it easy to slide it closer to the other. Wordlessly, she sat upon it and cuddled closer to Jon, resting her head on his shoulder. "It's hard to sleep in an empty bed anymore," she whispered, fitting their fingers together. "A queen needs her king." Raising her hand, Jon dropped a loving kiss onto the pale flesh. "A king needs his queen." He never understood why so many great men could cause their wives great pain by taking mistresses, his own ancestors included. He gazed upon her as if she were the maiden reborn. Not only the problem of bastards, but Jon could never feel for anyone what he felt for Dany. "It's always better to have loving company. Mostly." "I thought you had ghost for that," Dany teased lightly, snuggling against the crook of his neck. Jon chuckled tiredly. "When my cousin, Bran was on his sickbed, his direwolf protected him from an assassin. Ghost will do the same for our children." His gaze drifted back to the fire, unreadable. "If I must be alone, so be it." Dany squeezed his hand. "I love you, Jon." "And I you, Dany." She looked up at him, taking in the tired, haunted eyes. Slowly she reached up to cup his cheek. "What happened, Jon? Why aren't you in bed with me?" "It's nothing. Just a dream." Jon was grateful that Dany had not seen him awake a little while ago. Sweat coating his body like a sheen, lungs soaking in gulps of air as if a drowning man. It had been brutal. Only a dream. Only a dream? Dany didn't believe him for a moment. Rather than anger or annoyance, she merely kissed his jaw, his close-cropped beard tickling her nose. Her other hand shifted to rub his chest, the Dragon Queen loving the feeling of her dragon wolf's skin. "It couldn't just be a dream. If you're here. What troubles you, my love?" Dany could feel him relaxing from her touch. Turning towards her, Jon's breath hitched at Daenerys' tender gaze. Silver hair ethereal in the orange-red firelight. She looked so beautiful, so loving. She really did love him so. Jon could always trust her. But I want to keep her safe. He felt the intense urge to protect her from everything. She's the Dragon Queen. Let her help you. For some reason, the second voice in his head sounded like Sansa. It was the Night King. He was in my dreams. A shiver coursed through his body. He could still feel the icy cold draping over him. Dany hugged him tighter. Oh, Jon. Her hand found his heart, feeling the tension dissipate. What happened? Dropping his head, Jon rested it on hers. The scent of her hair calmed him. I saw him south of the wall, in Winterfell, in Dragonstone. He turned everyone. My siblings, my children, you. A tear fell down his cheek. I had Longclaw in my hand, but I just couldn't. Such is what brought him to the fire. Back to what was his Targaryen blood. Fire made flesh. Naturally hot, it wasn't often that Daenerys felt cold. Cold from within herself. The cold that seeped into her very bones. Now was one of those times. The tale of the long night hadn't been one that Viserys taught her during their childhood. But Sansa filled her in on it, Marjorie on the details of Hardhome, where she had seen it. Seen him. How did it happen? With Rhaegal? Marjorie had been vague, while Robb said it wasn't his place to tell her. She sensed his reluctance. I need to know. Resigned, Jon knew he had to tell her. It was painful, for Rhaegal was his dragon, Daenerys' child, but he was his rider. We were at Hardhome, rescuing the free folk, when they attacked. The dead swarmed the wall, charging off cliffs, hemming us in. Flashes of the bloodthirsty mob filled his mind. We killed hundreds, but they just kept coming. Nothing stopped them. No pain, no fear. They would never stop, never halt until every living thing in their path was dead. The chill deepened within Daenerys. How could anyone survive that? She thanked the gods that her Jon had. I called Rhaegal, and he came. Dany squeezed his hand. Jon understood the dragon's bond even then. He saved me. But the Night King... Jon remembered the horror that moment, as if it were minutes before. He took a spear, made of enchanted ice, and tossed it. Rhaegal was sliced through the shoulder, 1 inch to the left, and... He didn't go on, sensing Daenerys' soft sobs. It's all right, Dany, he kissed her. Mag and Wan helped me get him out, and I destroyed another ice spear. Valyrian steel, that stops them. His hand softly caressed her. I would never let anything happen to our family. Ever. I know, Dany murmured into his neck. Pulling back, she kissed him, slow and loving. We will stop them all, Jon. We are dragons. We make the impossible happen. In that moment, Jon believed her. Bright red adorning his youthful cheeks, Daenerys used all her control to maintain a regal air. The amused giggle threatened to bubble up at the sight of Jon's young squire. She figured that Ollie had only dealt with other men when up at the wall. Now, though, his face was ripe red and his eyes straining not to look at the nude dragon queen resting on the bed, thankfully covered by the furs. Dany imagined that the boy would have fainted had the furs not been there. Seeing Dany in the aftermath of the passionate love-making filling the room with moans and grunts not a quarter of an hour before. Was Jon this way when he was at his age? Then she remembered how he had been in Pentos at first. It was adorable, Jon's modesty and gentlemanliness. Tightening the buckle of his scabbard around his waist, Jon felt Ollie fasten the last of the straps on his armour. Thank you, Ollie. Why don't you go and get some breakfast now? Relief flooding his face, the squire soon-to-be emperor nodded. Thank you, my lord. Your grace? As soon as the door closed, the two shed simultaneous laughter. Did you have to do that to that poor boy? Jon asked his betrothed. Unlike Ollie, he didn't suppress his lustful glances directed at the evil queen. John should laugh more. Her direwolf changed into a serene, joyous individual when he laughed or smiled. It wasn't something John shared with many, only his siblings. And her. Danny felt honoured. Oh, come now, Jon Snow. Missandei has seen me naked plenty of times. The Dothraki didn't care for modesty, and it rubbed off on Danny. You northerners and your modesty. And yet, the Dragon Queen's heart was captured by a northerner. Jon enjoyed the beaming smile on her face. Daenerys was something else. The indomitable Dragon Queen among her subjects, or small councils, and the loving, sweet woman with her family, and a confident seductress when alone with him. Moving to take Longclaw, he noticed the glinting Valyrian steel of her blade resting next to it. Sir Jorah told me you've greatly improved since we last trained in Pentos. I should hope so, Danny replied, smiling at Jon. No one could deny he was handsome in the garb of a northern warrior. And he's mine, roared her inner dragon. I could use some more practice, though. My enemies are strong, so I will need to hone my flexibility and speed. Jon nodded. I know just the teacher. Another rare smile was cast her way. Perhaps I should have the smiths fashion you a set of armour. One befitting a proper Valyrian dragon warrior queen. Not a bad idea, my love. The images of Ramsay Bolton's men pissing themselves in terror of her atop Valyrian came to mind. I dare any of our enemies to not be intimidated by the royal pair atop their dragons. Quite true, though I was thinking of something else. Sitting on the bed, Jon leaned down until his breath was hot in her ear. Imagining you dressed as Visenya of old does things to me. And what would that do to you? She loved when he was like this. The knocking at the door echoed loudly enough through the room. Should I get one of my blood riders to get rid of them? One look in her eyes told him that Danny was seriously considering it. Khaleesi! Missandei's soft chuckle waffled through the door, making Jon chuckle. Though he wished to make Danny shatter onto him once more, duty called. Later, my queen. I have a surprise for the twins planned for this morning. Danny's gaze softened. Jon hitched Longclaw to his belt and opened the door, coming face to face with his queen's handmaid, Lady Missandei. Jumping slightly, the translator was shocked at the presence of the future king. Normally he had gotten dressed and left before she arrived. Missandei glanced at the flushed form of her queen, then back at Jon. My lord? Her tone was neutral and respectful, but her eyes twinkled with mirth. Stepping aside to allow him to leave, she strode to prepare Daenerys' wardrobe. Observant looks picked up several fresh bite marks splotched, marring the Dragon Queen's milky skin. New ones, your grace. Danny felt no shame, grinning. Absolutely. A content, faraway look on her face, remembering how each and every one happened. It doesn't surprise me, your grace. Grabbing a woolen northern-style dress, vibrant in a light sky blue, it added colour to the drab greys and blacks common in the north, while making Danny look less intimidating. The dragons and giants were intimidating enough. From what I have seen, it is the quiet, brooding types that make the most passionate, skilled lovers. Chuckling, Danny donned her undergarments, just as Missandei sheathed the dress from the top. You are right about that. The northern garment was warm and thick, but fit her like a glove. Is that how it is with Grey Worm? He is quiet and rather brooding. The translator simply blushed. All around him, Jon could see the life returning to Winterfell. Whatever traces of Bolton rule were gone, thank the gods. The surviving trinkets and decorations that hung here during his childhood were back. In a way, things were happier now with the Starks back in control. Danny is here, and I know my destiny. He was no bastard anymore, but a king. The small solar that belonged to the Lady of Winterfell boasted a loving sight to Jon. Papa! Dashing over in a blur, 2 sets of arms encircled his waist. Laughing merrily, Jon ruffled their hair. Papa!
Papa, come join us, Arya said, looking up at him. Aunt Sansa was just telling us the story of our ancestor, Bran the Builder.
Jon found Sansa, one eyebrow raised in questioning. She smiled at him. They wanted to know where their father served. Who better than to tell old Nan's stories to them? The littlest members of the packs were settling in quite nicely, eager to both watch Jon and Robb spar and to hear stories from their aunt. Davos was already making arrangements to find Rhaegar a master-at-arms to teach him how to fight, though if Arya was anything like her namesake, Jon would be hard-pressed to stop her from joining in. Good, he finally answered. The Crown Prince and Princess should know the history of their ancestors. Outside, the longer night had passed and was replaced by the morning sun. Sky still unseasonably cloudless. Perfect riding weather. Sweetlings, you are wolves of the north, as much as you are dragons of the Valyria.
Of course, Papa,
they both answered in unison. Unlike himself, each was equal parts mixture of Targaryen and Stark. No one could deny their resemblance to either Jon or Dany. Your uncles and I are going to survey the fields in Wolfwood. Would you like to join? See the lands of your Stark ancestors? To put it mildly, the twins rushed out into their rooms for their cloaks. Needles clutched in her hands as they expertly weaved. Sansa shook her head in a grin. Always in such a rush. Must be the Targaryen dragon in them. Fire and blood, all passion. Such would temper into steel with growth and experience, as it had with their mother. Well, I like this, in Marine, Mother. Quiet in the background, perusing Raven reports from her uncle at Riverrun, Catelyn Stark's head shot up. Yes, they were. Always curious and eager to learn. Sir Barristan said it reminded him of Jon's father. It had been quite awkward for the former Lady of Winterfell, given Robb and Sansa's frosty demeanour toward her, and the latter having essentially taken over as lady in her stead. Catelyn had been in discussion with Olenna Tyrell for a betrothal between Robb and Marjorie, her eldest needing a bride. Last time hadn't gone so well for him at all, but the Rose of Highgarden was the best match possible, and they were smitten with each other, Jon's consent being all what was needed. In the meantime, Catelyn was preoccupying herself as the representative for her uncle and recently freed brother. Eyes meeting for the first time in a long while, the soft and guilty-looking Catelyn's was matched with the icy one in Jon's. I am glad my children inherited their grandfather's intelligence, Lady Stark. He may have forgiven, but he certainly had not forgotten. Many years had passed since Jon had last experienced a true northern winter. Arya had just been born, and he and Robb were far too young to truly grasp the majesty of their homeland. Jon was determined to show his children the true majesty of the Stark homeland early on. They were mighty dragons, but they were wolves as well. There is the wolfswood, sweetlings, he said, pointing to the line of still green trees contrasting with the snow. It stretches all the way to the western sea. Atop their horses, as skillfully as any armoured knight. Jon was not surprised. The Dothraki training and all that. The twins gazed in awe at their father's homeland.
Is that the plain, Father? Where you defeated usurper Ramsay Bolton?
Rhaegar gestured to the snow-covered flat ground stretching on the northern approach to the castle. Aye, Robb chimed in, one's massive figure crossing his arms. The Dothraki blood riders assigned to protect the prince's attention riveted. They did not understand much of the common tongue, but they did hear Ramsay Bolton loud and clear. Young Rickon seemed to shrink away, the conversation touching on a sore subject for him. Jon charged him on Rhaegar to save your Uncle Rickon, but the Boltons wounded the dragon, so Jon had to stay and fight.
A usurper wounded Rhaegar?
Rhaegar was shocked.
A dragon is invincible!
Urging his horse, a stout northern mare from Bear Island, Jon trotted beside his son. Rhaegar. Nothing nor no one is invincible. He wrapped an arm around the boy's shoulders, just like Ned had used to do with him. It was true that Rhaegal was wounded, and thus vulnerable, but especially in battle. You must be careful and vigilant. A good fighter and king knows this. Understood? Jon gently prodded. "Yes, Papa."
"But Father isn't vulnerable to anything."
Arya sounded quite like her mother at that moment, and standing straight with an almost patrician set in her jaw, supremely confident in her father as Dany was in him. Before Jon could respond, an as yet silent voice boomed, "Come on now, little crow. The times I've pulled this one out of trouble could fit in a big, fat southern book of yours." Grinning under his unkempt red beard, Tormund went to Arya and pointed at the centre of the field. "That's where my axe saved the King Crow's bacon from some southern idiot." Jon, irritated as he was, had to give the wildling credit for censoring himself for the King's twins' benefit. Furrowing her brow, Arya was puzzled. "What's King Crow mean?" The wildling chuckled. "Your daddy's black cloak looks like a crow from far away. Even more so now, for he's the king of the crows, 'cause he flies now." Tormund chortled at his own joke, airing a glare from Jon. Giggles left his daughter's lips, so Jon figured the embarrassment was worthwhile.
"That's funny, Papa."
Her gaze returned to the landscape around her.
"So much snow,"
she said in awe. Growing up in Essos, Jon doubted she'd ever experienced even a cool day. "Much snow?" A dismissive grunt came from the lone giant among them. One remained in Winterfell while his family stayed in the Gift, while Magmar journeyed north of the wall to see if any giants remained among the living. His hand gestured across the wide expanse before them. "Small snow." Noticing the puzzled expressions of his kids, hells on all faces present excluding Tormund, Jon took an amused pity on them. "He means that this snowfall is nothing compared to what is north of the wall." Months among the free folk had left him almost fluent in the guttural Magnuk used to communicate. "When you are king, Rhaegar, this whole land will be entrusted to you. And the Warden of the North you seek to appoint. It is vital that you choose your subordinates wisely, persons both strong and fair with a love for the common people, as your mother has." Rhaegar mulled it over, jaw tense in thought. "Uncle Rob, will you be the loyal Warden of the North during my rule?" Rob laughed. "It would be an honour to serve you, my prince." He was cut off by Arya.
"Silly brother. He'll be Papa's Warden of the North. Yours will be his son with Aunt Marjorie."
Jon stifled a belly chortle, as did Rickon, at the reddening of his brother's face. The two of them weren't subtle in their obvious affections for each other. Gazing out at the castle, it was only thanks to his raging instincts that he heard the galloping of hooves behind him. "My lord!" Urging his horse to turn, Jon spotted one of his bannermen, one of the new ones raised from the Bolton prisoners who hadn't been sent to Meereen. A growl came from Ghost, instantly suspicious of strangers. "Ghost, heel," Jon ordered. Whimpering, the direwolf doubled back with his tail between his legs, settling in close to Rhaegar. The Crown Prince leaned down from his horse to ruffle Ghost's fur. He emitted a contented hum. Jon shared a smirk with Rob before turning back to the messenger. "What is this about, then?" Gulping, the bannerman's only comfort was that the White Wolf, direwolf, and not his dragon, or the Queen's dragons. Glancing up at one's towering form did him no favour, so, "Horses to the west, my lord. Banners bearing the fist sigil."
"Fist sigil? House Glover."
Arya's eyes met her father's.
"Right, Papa?"
Rhaegar, not one to allow his twin sister to show him up, added his own remembered fact. "From Deepwood Motte, Papa." Arya glared at him in annoyance while her brother only preened. Jon couldn't help but chuckle, leaving his lips. Exactly like Bran and Arya. "Aye, good memory, my princess," Rob said, praising each of them. The twins beamed, feeling 10 feet tall.
"Shall we go meet with them, Papa?"
Rhaegar asked. Glancing west, Jon could just make out the tops of the banners. "I don't see why not. With me, men. Best that Rob and I greet them first." All wanted to avoid any confrontations with Dany or her dragons before the official banquet. Lord Robert Glover was just as hard and weathered as when he had denied Jon his fealty in facing Ramsay Bolton. "Jon Snow," he said rather bitingly. The massive giant towering before him joined Tormund in reminding the Old Lord why he hadn't sided with Jon in the Battle of the Bastards. Robb Stark? Pursing his lips, Robb said nothing, even as Jon began to simmer. His lack of respect was quite well earned. He would have to fight harder than ever before to win it back. However, he had a champion. "You will call my father and uncle by their proper titles, Lord Glover." Dozens of pairs of eyes darted to young Arya. Like Lyanna Mormont, she possessed a steel beyond her years. Silent Lord Glover blinked. "Who are you?" Jon trotted his horse till he was mere feet from the Northern Lord. "Allow me to introduce you, Lord Glover. These are Crown Prince Rhaegar and Princess Arya Targaryen of the Seven Kingdoms, children of Queen Daenerys Targaryen Stormborn, and myself." Jon's fiery gaze made it clear that the dragon would be awoken if the Glover party tried anything. Thankfully, the old lord merely bowed. "Forgive me, Princess. It is no way for a guest to behave to his host. We are not Freys." Calming down, Jon allowed the graciousness for Lord Glover. "Come to the castle. You must need some food and rest." Swelling with pride at his children, Jon just knew at that moment that he wouldn't need to worry about the Targaryen madness with them. There wasn't much that usually cowed or humbled Daenerys, though she did her best to rein in her more arrogant and hubristic inclinations. The ancient blood-red visage of the weirwood tree nevertheless managed to do so. Daenerys couldn't explain it, but she could feel a mystic energy leaving it. The weirwood awed her. The godswood, imbuing her with a spiritual penitence never before felt. "Still, you're sure that the marriage must be of the old faith?" As much as she wished to marry Jon, every part of her craving it desperately, Dany disliked redundancy. "I would prefer our wedding and coronation to be at the same time." It went unsaid that she approved of Sam and Sansa's suggestion of empire. "Absolutely sure, Daenerys." Northern hardiness aside, Sansa nevertheless cupped her nose with her hands, channeling her warm breath upward. Surrounding them were Brienne and the Dothraki Bloodriders, protecting the three women from any threat. Even if the Northern Lords accept you as their ruler alongside Jon, an extra dose of humility will go a long way. Show you aren't a conqueror, but a protector. By all accounts, mostly from her long conversations in bed with Jon, Sansa had been a typical romantic teenager with her head in the clouds, at the same time Dany was the last in Winterfell. And now, here they were, a queen in all intents and purposes, a hand of the king beside her. Daenerys was impressed. "I will be their queen as much as I will be their empress. They do not need to be afraid of me." Sansa gave her a smile. "It isn't you they are afraid of, but rather the spectre of the Mad King or the Mad Prince." From his short rule, Viserys had made a serious bid for their father's legacy. "Learning from your punishment of him would greatly help if it comes from you personally." The conversation where Dany informed him of his status as a Blackfire had gone just as badly and as oddly amusing as one would think. "Although there is one part that confuses me." Marjorie had learned directly from the most cunning manipulator in the Seven Kingdoms, not named Tywin Lannister. Her life had been hard, but it wasn't as trial by fire nature as Dany and Sansa's. Hypothetically, if Robb and I were to marry, based on internal developments, it was all but a certainty. We would conduct both ceremonies before the old gods, and the seven at once. Why have one at the coronation? If we are to create a whole new crown for each other, we must be married as equals. Daenerys would not stand for Jon to be considered at a lower station than her. Following their coronation, they would be wed in the eyes of the seven, cementing their status as equals, to rule and protect their empire together. The magnitude suddenly hit Daenerys. "I'm getting married." Political dynamics and the importance of alliance didn't really faze the Dragon Queen, but this was different. "I'm marrying Jon." The stars had aligned perfectly. Not only was Jon, as Tyrion put it, The best damn bachelor in all the 7 kingdoms. The upcoming marriage was also a love match. No noble woman could ever hope for half as much. How do I deserve this blessing from the gods? Daenerys had no answers. A rustle in the grove barely merited a second glance by the party. A second, louder rustle drew their attention. Brienne, tensing while the Dothraki blood riders preemptively formed a loose defensive screen around their queen and her companions. When a branch snapped, a full alert was triggered. "Stay back," Brienne cautioned to Sansa, blade drawn. Dany felt her heart beating, hand on Saracen. "Raiders?" asked Marjorie, to no one in particular. There had been scattered reports of Bolton diehards causing havoc closer to the Dreadfort, but nothing this close to Winterfell. Everyone here was a Stark loyalist. Sansa quickly drew her dagger, not intending to ever be captured again. With the snapping twigs growing closer and closer, Daenerys turned to her blood riders. "Coro! Flush out the intruder!" she barked in Dothraki. The words were obvious enough that when the long-haired blood rider snarled and headed to the grove with his arak raised. "Come out, Andal," he said in a halting common tongue picked up from Ser Jorah. "You cannot hope to kill Queen Daenerys." He disappeared through the thick leaves, only to reappear after a tense silence, a massive grey-white beast growling with teeth bared. It was as big as Ghost. Actually, exactly like Ghost apart from the colour, to the shock of all present, Sansa especially. "But there are no direwolves south of the wall." "Oh, if I was seeking to kill you, you'd be dead already." A voice hitting Sansa like a charging ox, it was as if a long-dead spirit was facing her. Out of the woods then emerged 3 figures clothed in warm furs, but only one drew the Lady of Winterfell's attention. Much older and far too experienced in the realities of life, there was still no denying it. Even still, utter shock still tinged Sansa's tone. "Arya?" Dany's eyes widened. "Jon's sister!" There had been a sort of tenderness, which Jon had talked about her, more so than with his other siblings. Such had been her driving motivation in naming her daughter after the sister so dear to Jon's heart, of a wild, headstrong, yet sensitive girl that burrowed her way into one's heart and never left. And here was Arya Stark in the flesh, emotional reunion bringing out all that Jon had said about her. Dany could detect a hardness within her, a stoicism earned as hers and Sansa's had, the past years having affected them all. "Sansa!" Both Gendry and Hot Pie stepped back, content in letting the reunion play out. Even Nymeria gave the sisters a wide berth. "I'm home." Eyes flickered to the other women. "Who are they?" Initial shock wearing off, Sansa tried to remain composed. "This is Lady Marjorie Tyrell and Queen Daenerys Targaryen, the Dragon Queen and Jon's betrothed." Eyes widening at who she was standing before, Arya bowed. "Your Grace." She had no love for protocol, but she did for those who respected. What followed was clearly her personality. "Do I have to call you Lady Stark now?" Amazingly, Sansa kept a straight face. "Yes." Smiles then broadened onto their lips, the 2 sisters embracing tightly. "Welcome home, sister." "Open the gate!" called out the guards as the party arrived at the castle. If they were shocked to see another massive direwolf, it didn't show. A castle full of dragons and giants largely took away the capability to be shocked. Riveted to the massive direwolf banners strung over the walls of the castle, Arya felt every bit of the surreal nature of the moment. "Rickon! Robb? But I saw Grey Wind's head on a body." The memory was still a hard one to swallow. "Lies!" spat Sansa. "For Walder Frey and Roose Bolton to curry favour with Joffrey." Dany nodded. "And your brother Bran is alive as well. He is safe in Essos under the care of my soldiers." And so, through all of it, the fighting and the chaos, all of Ned Stark's brood had lived. "It just seems too good to be true," the young girl confessed. Arya scowled. "I am still glad the Freys are dead." as well as the rest on my list. Changing the subject, she turned to Dany. So, you're marrying my brother? Feeling it wasn't the time or place to confess the truth, Dany punted. Yes, we will be married. He couldn't stop thinking about you before he left for the wall. I can tell you love each other. But if you hurt him, I will kill you. The iron set of her jaw belayed Arya's seriousness. Your Grace, Catelyn began, just happening to be walking around the grounds upon their arrival. We must... She stopped in her tracks. Jaw slag. Arya? Mother! In no time the young woman was swept into a motherly embrace. The two had driven the other mad, but at that moment there was nothing but love and anguish. I thought you were dead of the twins! Only soft sobs left Catelyn as she wrapped her arms tightly around her daughter. While she could have stayed buried in her mother's skirts for hours, Arya suddenly, still nervously excited. Her head swiveled around the courtyard, looking for someone specific. Where is Jon? All of the last years of her life had led to this moment, and the one person she most wanted to see again was nowhere to be found. Even Daenerys was slightly concerned. He was supposed to arrive. Any worries to his whereabouts were buried when the gate was opened. Make way for the Lord! Called one of the bannermen, a large party of horsemen entering. Dany could see the banners of House Glover mixing with the Stark direwolf, and at the vanguard was Jon. Maester Walken, have the stewards get our guests settled in. Get the horses stabled and... Eyes searching for Daenerys, needing to see her, Jon began to smile. But then noticed the small warrior to her left. He stared in stunned silence, a look shared by Robb, Rickon, and even the Lady Brienne. Papa? Who's that? Arya's namesake asked inquisitively, her and her brother confused atop their horses. The father didn't hear them, dismounting with his gaze never leaving Arya. She had changed, just as all of them had, in many facets even more so. But there was no denying it was her. His eyes shone, twinkling with unadulterated joy. It was done. His family confirmed safe and alive. Is it really you? Jon finally said. If her normal stoicism had been sorely tested at the reunion with her mother and siblings, seeing Jon after so long was the emotional equivalent of a blast of dragon fire. Lip quivering, a single tear fell from her cheek. Breaking into a run, she leapt into his embrace, burying her face into his tunic. There would undoubtedly be emotional reunions with Robb and Rickon, not to mention when she met her niece and nephew. But for now, all her attention was reserved for her brother. A voice a mix of laughter and tears. Jon noticed the narrow point clipped to his sister's belt. You kept it! Disappeared for so long, the same sword he had personally made for her still remained in her possession. Arya grinned. You gave it to me. Of course I kept it. Another merry laugh left Jon's lips as he twirled his sister around. Knowing that Bran was safe in Essos, the Starks were finally together again. Winterfell was whole. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that, because that is one flipping gorgeous chapter. Can we just say both Aryas are fully in their element here. Little Arya talking down to Lord Glover. Okay, little princess, go show that dragonfire. And of course the reunion. Arya is one of my favourite characters, and I absolutely adore her reunion with them. And her basically threatening Dany in front of everybody. Okay, the girl has got guts. Though I'm still glad she wiped out the phrase, though admittedly the way she did it, eesh. But what can you do? It's Game of Thrones. You have to have gore in here somewhere. And of course, just everything about this is just great. Anyway, have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Bye!